Good morning, everyone. I'm Ifeoma Ikenze, Dr. Ikenze, and these workshops that I do address every aspect of our existence as humans, visible and invisible, material and non-material, physical and spiritual, all aspects. If you look around you, everywhere, there's discord, there's disharmony. In all the countries, in politics, in religion, in homes, families, marriages. Everywhere there's financial distress, there's emotional distress, anxiety, despair, depression in everyone, even in children. So how did we get to this? How did we get to this state? You know, let's take a look at our perceptions and our understanding of life. With all the illusions and the thought patterns that have been instilled into us, inculcated into us from childhood by our families, not just our parents, but our quote unquote tribe, the surroundings in which you live, the people who are around you, your friends, the schools, the media, and the society at large in which you live. From these sources, we get our sense of our place in the world. And we get a sense of belonging, a sense of who we are in the world. And that makes us comfortable. That sense of belonging makes us comfortable. Well, think. A person who is comfortable has no need to question his or her comfort. And if you have no need to question your comfort, then you have no need to question your perceptions and your illusions. But I just said, we're all in distress. Everyone is in distress. So how can we be comfortable and at the same time in distress? So let me tell you the story of the frog. There's this frog, he lives in this beautiful pond of water. The water is clear and cool, wonderful. He jumps around in the water and he frolics around in the water and he's happy. And then, very gradually, very gradually, the water becomes slowly polluted. Toxins come into the water, poisons come into the water, bacteria start to grow in it, fungi start to grow in it. The water becomes turbid and becomes murky and thick and frothy. And with all the bacteria growing in it, they generate heat. It becomes warmer and warmer. The frog begins to be lethargic. The frog begins to be suffocated. But this process is happening so slowly that the frog is unaware of what's happening. And the frog is just getting more and more and more lethargic. And because he's becoming lethargic, he can't jump. He can't jump freely and he can't jump out of the pond because he's too weak to jump out of the pond. And he is not aware of what's going on. And he becomes gradually unconscious. In a way, we are like the frog. We are spirit beings, and as spirit beings, we're living in the material world, which we can compare to the pond of water. We have the ability to move around freely within this pond, which is the world in which we're living right now. But what is freedom of movement? Freedom of movement is really freedom to think, freedom to speak, and freedom to act. That's it. That's the only way in which we manifest ourselves as spirit beings in this material world. So every thought, every word, and every action we generate adds to the clarity or to the pollution of our surroundings. But it adds to the clarity or to the pollution of our surroundings, materially and non-materially, visibly and invisibly, physically and spiritually. But the spiritual is invisible. It's non-material. We can't see it, but it is definitely there. So every thought, every word, and every action we generate adds to the clarity or to the pollution of our spiritual environment as well as our physical environments. But like the frog, this process has been very gradual over thousands and thousands of years. And like the frog, we are becoming slowly suffocated. And we sense this suffocation. We feel distressed. We feel suffocated. But we are unconscious of the actual process, what the cause of the process is, and how it is happening and why it is happening. How did we get to this point is the question. Should we blame our political leaders? Should we blame our religious leaders? Perhaps should we blame our parents for the way we were brought up and the perceptions and thought patterns that we have imbibed from our families and our tribes? Or should we possibly blame ourselves? Just as the frog became slowly suffocated and unable to move, we are immersed in thought energy. There's thought energy that surrounds us, like the water that surrounds the frog. And that thought energy that's surrounding us right now is as murky as the murky water that has caused the frog to suffocate. And we are suffocating in it and unable to move in it. And because we're unable to move in it, we become gradually more and more entrenched in it. But what do I mean by entrenched? The thought energy that surrounds us affects us and infects us, affects us, infects us. And we begin to think along those same lines. It's a very gradual process. So we can't even see ourselves that we're also drawn into that pattern of thinking and being and those attitudes. And this is important because of that, we have become entrenched and enmeshed in our ideas, our perceptions, our behavior. And the next question that comes from that is, how do we disentangle ourselves? How do we become unenmeshed or unentrenched? How did we get to that point, and how can we get out of it? Is the basic question. Let's go back over the history of humankind. You know, people lived very simple lives thousands of years ago, and their lives were governed by the cycles of nature, such as when to plant their seed, when to harvest. In observing nature, they became very aware of an invisible dimension to nature, a driving force in nature, which they came to venerate. They learned from the very beginning that if you put a grain of corn in the soil, you would harvest corn. You would never harvest rice. But they also learned that if you put one grain of corn in the ground, you had to wait a certain amount of time before you could harvest it. And when you harvested it, you would get a lot of grains of corn for that one grain that you put in the ground. They also observed that anything that was heavy sort of sank down, and anything that was light sort of rose up. But the most important thing that they observed was that the cycles of nature were always there and always dependable and never ever failing, meaning the sun always rises the next day. The moon, the cycles of the moon were always the same. And they themselves observed in themselves that their lives of, being born, growing up, dying, and then somebody else gets born, grows up, and dies. All that brought them to the conviction of reincarnation. And from these observations, reincarnation became common knowledge among almost all ancient societies. Not only reincarnation being common knowledge, but the people themselves, in observing the invisible driving forces in nature and venerating it, this became the beginnings of the concept of worship. Now, fast forward thousands of years to today. We've advanced in our efforts to master our surroundings, and we're much more intellectually advanced than in the past. And because of that, we are more oriented to the physical, the material, because we're trying to control our environment. We want to be masters of our environment. And the environment that we can see is the material environment. We can't see the spiritual, but we develop our intellects in order to master our physical environment. In the process, we neglect the invisible, the non-physical environment. But that doesn't make that non-physical environment go away. It's still there. It's always still there. But we can only interact with it, communicate with it through our intuitive faculties. Just like the ancient people were intuitive, they used their intuitive faculties. Today, over thousands of years of not using our intuitive faculties and wallowing in a physical and spiritual environment that has become increasingly polluted with, let's use, unclear, disharmonious thought patterns, violent word patterns in our language, in what we say and how we say it, and in our actions. We are surrounded by so much spiritual pollution. We can see the physical pollution in all our rivers and our lakes and our cities. We can see it. We feel ourselves suffocating in the physical. But spiritually, the pollution is just as bad or much, much worse. And we are suffocating as spirits, but we are unaware of it. And we've become lethargic. We've become spiritually lethargic. And that is a problem which we cannot really solve until we become aware of it and acknowledge it. Bear in mind that whether we acknowledge it or we do not, the same principles that exist in nature, in the universe, in creation, call it what you want, the principles of nature, the nature laws, the laws of the universe, still govern everything. Everything. And we, as creatures within the universe, within creation, are subject to those laws, physically as well as spiritually, whether we acknowledge them or we do not. And over time, we have become gradually separated from our spiritual selves, which means we have been separated from our spiritual origin. Because to return to our spiritual origin, we have to reconnect with our spiritual selves. Now, when we have become so encased, it becomes difficult for us to pull ourselves out of this intellectual, material way of thinking. And I can assure you that even those of us who think we're very spiritual, or let me say, I, as well as every other person, I'm enmeshed in my intellectual thinking pattern. And then I try to use that to think spiritually. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work. We have to go back and reacquaint ourselves with nature and creation as nature really is, and as creation really is, based on the principles of nature that have been there all along. From the very beginning, they've been there and they will be there into all eternity. As long as we do not do that, then all our thinking, and be aware that every action you undertake, every word you speak, proceeds first from the thought. So all our thinking, all our living, all our institutions are based on an unstable foundation, because the spiritual appreciation of the laws of nature the laws of creation is missing. And because that is missing, everything is built on an unstable foundation and can only lead to disharmony, discord, distress, and despair. Next question. How can I get out of this entanglement? How can I get out of this encasement of my mind and my person? How can I pull myself out of it? Well, the first step, it's simple. Become reacquainted with the principles of natural law, the spiritual principles that drive everything physical and spiritual. To be acquainted is not to learn about it. It's not to study it, which is what we do. We use our intellect, we study. We study world religions. We study, biology. We study chemistry and physics. You study things. To be acquainted with something is not to study it. It is to become intimate with it, to let it into your life and let it become the driving force and an integral part of your daily life and your daily existence in every moment and in every aspect of your life. Now, this may sound easy, but it definitely is not easy. It demands constant self-exertion. We've all become too lethargic to really exert ourselves from our spirit. Yeah, when you exert yourself for your job, you exert yourself to earn your living, and so on. But to exert yourself from your spirit in every waking moment is something that we haven't done for thousands of years. And now we have to learn to do that. And you must learn to do it. Nobody else can do it for you. You and you alone must do it. Now, if we look back over the history of humankind, individuals have come and lived among us and brought messages, or brought each individual that has brought a message to teach us, to remind us of our spiritual origin, and to teach us how to live in creation according to the principles of creation. Each of these individuals was a messenger who was sent from the spiritual, and as a messenger came as a servant of the Creator and brought a message to the humans living on earth. But each of these messengers had to actually be born as a human, live on earth among humans, and speak their language and interact with them in order to communicate the message to the humans among whom he lived. So one could say each time the messenger had to incarnate on earth as a human and give this message to the people around him. We can think of many, or at least a few such messengers, can we not? But because of the fact that the humans have already for thousands of years been sliding into suffocation and lethargy and becoming more and more separated from their spiritual selves and their intuitive selves, and using more and more of their intellect to uh, to absorb any kind of information that was given to them. It was only natural that this spiritual information would be taken up from an intellectual place. And it often happened that after the messenger had lived the number of years he lived on earth and left, the people who lived around him often appropriated his words or his teaching, added to it, removed from it, whatever they wanted, reproduced it, packaged it, passed it down according to their way of thinking, and ultimately created a religion out of it. Oftentimes, the messenger, who is simply a messenger, became deified. The actual content of the message was often ignored, and the person, everything became centered around the person of the messenger. And the result was that over centuries and generations, posterity got handed packaged religion with adulterated information. And in fact, when you think about it, many of the so-called spiritual and sacred writings were not actually written by the purported founders of these religions, because many of them did not actually write down their own words themselves. They spoke these words to their followers, and their followers subsequently wrote down what they believed they heard, sometimes while the messenger was still with them, but oftentimes only way, way after the messenger had already left. And one could say this was the case for some of the messengers that we have historical accounts of, such as Krishna, Lao Tzu, Moses, Elijah, Zoroaster, Buddha, and then Jesus Christ. And after Jesus Christ, Muhammad, and Baha'u'llah, and many others that we don't have historical records of. But if one were to really take the time to look into the actual teachings and words of these messengers, you find that each one of them brought a universal message. The content was the same. But today we have all these different religions. And if you're a person who considers yourself non-religious, be aware that the damage has already been done. And the reason I'm saying that is because we have all lived on this earth many times before. We don't get born in the same place over and over again. You're born in one place one time, you're born in another place another time. So we have all been exposed to all these patterns of thinking, and we have all imbibed it. And I want you to think about the fact that everything you absorb during your life all adds up, all contributes to who you are, how you think, your attitudes, your beliefs, your behavior. The sum total of everything that you have absorbed from all your previous lifetimes. So the foundation for this way of thinking has been going on for many lifetimes. And we are all encased in it. And each one of us has to make the decision and the effort to break out of it, regardless of whether you're religious or atheist or agnostic. Makes no difference. You're still encased in a materially based way of thinking, speaking, and acting, which in a way shuts out your spiritual side. If we look at the original teachings of these messengers, the teachings were very simple and they were universal. All these truth messengers brought the same message. The first principle of the teachings: do to others as you would have them do to you. Very simple. Second, love the Creator and love His creation. To love His creation means to love everything in His creation, not just the creatures in His creation, not just the humans in His creation, because there are many creatures in creation other than humans, but to love everything, everything in His creation. That includes the principles, the laws that govern His creation. And to love the laws is to know them, to become intimate with them, and to let them into your life and let them become a part of your life. The third teaching or principle is the center of all teachings. What a person sows, he will always reap. Always. Always. There are absolutely no exceptions. You will always reap what you sow. Now, if we say we bring suffering upon ourselves through our earthly desires, your desire is something you sow. You put it out. It will always bring back to you something similar to whatever it is you desired. But it brings a lot, much more than you anticipated. And then now you're overwhelmed by it. So if Buddha says freedom comes from ending endless chain of karma, we recite that What does that really mean? What does it really mean? It means that to become free, you must end the endless cycle of desiring or of putting out thoughts, words, or actions that will return to you and entangle you more or hold you down. Very simple. That's it, really. It's not a lot. It's very simple. So, regardless of what religion you subscribe to, or no religion at all, although even those of us who say we don't subscribe to any religion, be aware that the groups you subscribe to, the thought patterns you subscribe to, is your religion. You know, if you're in the financial industry and you're struggling to make more money, that's your religion. Anything that encompasses us and entangles us and holds us firm in its firm grip, it's as good as a religion. So it takes us back to the idea that we bring suffering upon ourselves through our earthly desires. Again, I'll say, regardless of what religion you subscribe to, or no religion at all, look more deeply into this and try to grasp this universal message, which is intended, which was sent to us over and over and over again. Not once, not twice, not three times, not four times, over and over and over again. And is being sent to us now, again, now, this time, at this time, to help rescue us from the entanglements which we have buried ourselves in, encased ourselves in over many, many lifetimes and over thousands of years. But the rescue is in the message itself. The rescue is not the messenger. The rescue is the message itself.